To those skeptics out there who've insisted that a second Trump administration won't be that bad, it's going to be more professional and serious and unifying rather than extreme and deranged. Well, prepare to shit your pants because CNN is reporting that Trump has tapped Stephen Miller, xenophobe and bigot, among other things, to be the policy leader in his White House. Yikes. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Yep, the guy who is advocating for denaturalizing U.S. citizens and rounding up all immigrants in detention camps before ejecting them forcibly from the country, that guy is going to be the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, according to CNN, based on breaking news and insider sources. The Independent's talking about it. Trump ready to name immigration hardliner, which is, putting it mildly, Stephen Miller as policy leader in the White House. Trump is reportedly gearing up to name Stephen Miller, his former senior advisor and hardliner on immigration, to serve as his deputy chief of staff for policy, CNN reported. Miller has long worked in Trump world, going back to the president-elect's 2016 campaign as a speechwriter. He served as a senior advisor in the first Trump administration. In that capacity, he helped craft the zero-tolerance policy that separated migrant children from their parents. Miller also helped craft the Trump administration's travel ban from majority Muslim countries. I want to stop people right there for just a second. I normally don't weigh in on foreign policy issues and foreign policy as a whole. There's a reason we don't talk about Ukraine and Russia or Israel, Gaza. I just want to say to those out there who, again, were skeptical that the Trump administration or a second Trump administration would be so xenophobic and bigoted towards Muslims, in a second Trump administration, the way it was in the first Trump administration, people who may have voted for Jill Stein or not voted at all because they have seriously justified disagreements with the Biden-Harris administration with respect to Gaza. To those of you who thought that the Trump administration wouldn't step in that direction the way it did the first Trump administration, this should be red lights, check engine light. This should be like warnings everywhere, alert, klaxons going off. Because the guy who basically drafted the Muslim ban is going to be given an even higher position in a second Trump administration. That doesn't bode well. We'll continue. The move comes as Trump, who won a second term to the White House last week, has pledged to begin his plans for mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. The former president has also said there is, quote, no price tag for his plan, meaning he's not going to let the exorbitant expense get in the way of his eagerness to violate human rights and civil liberties. The former aide to Jeff Sessions and Michelle Bachmann has previously laid out plans for a potential Trump administration. During a panel at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, this year, Miller described, and then the article ends. I don't know why it ended that abruptly. Some other things, just to remind you who Stephen Miller is. If you see his face, it's this guy. You know this guy. Of course you do. So, yes, we started a new denaturalization project under Trump in 2025. We expect it to be turbocharged. So what does that mean? Well, he wants to denaturalize American citizens, meaning if you're not a native-born American, if you were here through the naturalization process, he wants the ability to take your citizenship from you, your constitutionally protected citizenship. They want to strip it. So again, just want to be clear, it's not just about kicking out undocumented migrants or undocumented migrants who have ties to the community, have been here for decades. Not only does he want to kick them all out, but immigrants who have come here legally and have been naturalized, well, he wants the power to strip that from you as well. This is what Donald Trump's nephew had to say recently about the prospect of Trump being surrounded by certain people. And he mentions Stephen Miller by name. Again, food for thought.
You have said in the past that January 6th, and you've certainly met with him many times, but you said January 6th was a real turning point for you, as it was for many Americans who saw that and attribute what happened that day to the rhetoric of Donald Trump. But what scares you the most about a potentially second Trump presidency?
I think what scares a lot of people, there are no, to use the word in vogue, guardrails anymore. Just think of the people that he is now surrounding himself with. There's no General Kelly. There's no General Mattis. There's Stephen Miller and Tom Homan And God, Rudy Giuliani coming back. That's
from Trump's own nephew, mentioning the horrors associated with Stephen Miller being the guardrail here. So just again, some additional context about this man, whom many people may have unfortunately forgotten about, but sounds like you might need to brush up. We all do. Trump made mass deportations and a hardline crackdown on undocumented immigration and asylum seekers a central pillar of his campaign. As previously reported by Rolling Stone, the former president has expressed a desire to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, an 18th century wartime law that was used to justify the imprisonment of Japanese Americans in internment camps during the Second World War, to authorize the detainment and removal of undocumented migrants. Longtime Trump advisor and immigration hawk Stephen Miller has stated publicly that the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act over existing immigration law would allow Trump's future administration to, quote, suspend the due process that normally applies to a removal proceeding. People talk about getting creative to sideline or overstep due process. Again, alarm should be going off, people. The logistics of the plan would be expansive and expensive. In November 2023, Miller told the New York Times that Trump is prepared to weaponize the Insurrection Act to use law enforcement, federal law enforcement, the National Guard, and local law enforcement as immigration jackboots in the national crackdown. Miller also touted the construction of massive detainment camps, concentration camps, if you will, in areas of rural Texas to hold migrants awaiting deportation. The money to fund their construction would come from the military and Department of Homeland Security. Yeah. So eventually, somebody's going to do it, and we'll play it here. It's going to be a compilation of all the unhinged things that Stephen Miller has publicly advocated for on camera, because the guy is not shy. Let's be very clear about this. He is not a wallflower. He loves to talk about his bigotry and xenophobia and authoritarian impulses and fascism. It's all there. Somebody just has to go through all the many clips and squeeze them together in a compilation. But that's where we are, folks. Stephen Miller is going to be Deputy Chief of Staff and the leader of White House policy. And again, I just really want to put this in perspective. When Donald Trump assumes office at 12 o'clock at noon, January 20th, 2025, just by virtue of being the president of the United States, he's going to be the most powerful man in the world. But he's going to be the most powerful man in the world because he's operating with fewer constraints. He has a sympathetic 6-3 conservative supermajority who love to give powers to the executive, including sweeping immunity. So if Trump breaks laws in this second term, it's going to be considerably harder to try to hold him to account than it was a year ago, which was already pretty damn hard. Number one. Number two, he's going to have a Republican majority in the Senate, and that Republican majority have made it abundantly clear that they will bend over backwards to do basically whatever he wants. And they'll have a surplus. It's going to be, I think, a 53-47 split. So it's not like it's even a 50-50 split the way Democrats have had to manage, where if you have one or two defections, that's potentially the end of it. Now, the party that's not particularly inclined to defect in the first place because they're cultishly terrified of Trump will now have a surplus. So in the off chance that a Lisa Murkowski or a Mitt Romney, who, by the way, won't be here, he's done. He's not seeking re-election. But Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski, if they try to hold Trump to account, the Republicans can say, well, just defect. That's fine, because we have more than enough to get Donald Trump's confirmations and his judges through the Senate. Judges that they will pick to be totally sympathetic to Stephen Miller's position on executive power and immigrants. They're going to pre-screen these people who are already predisposed to give Stephen Miller what he wants and Donald Trump what he wants, and they're going to run right through. And then they're probably going to have the House of Representatives too, which means that whatever people think that Stephen Miller's executive powers lack could be beefed up by legislation. This is not good. This is not good. We are truly, truly at the mercy of Donald Trump and the MAGA Republican Party. And if this is any indication, that's not very encouraging, because we're just days out from the election that Trump won, months away from his inauguration, and he's already announcing insane, unhinged moves like this, like lifting up Stephen Miller and making him one of the most powerful people in the federal government. That should chill the blood of everyone. Elections have consequences. In the meantime, let me know what you think, in the comments.